Welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be diving in.
So today we're wrestling with something pretty fundamental, wouldn't you say? It's right at the heart of, well, human progress.
Absolutely. The core question is, how do we actually build character? Real societal strength. Is it just about getting through the tough stuff life throws at us?
Yeah, the whole school of hard knocks idea.
Sure.
Or is there another way? Can we actually, design a system, build a foundation of trust and stability that helps people flourish without all the historical pain and waste?
And that's exactly what our sources tackle head on. This age-old conflict, they call it the Crucible Thesis versus the conscious Ascent Thesis.
Right.
It pulls it right out of the philosophy books and, well, puts it to the test. We're looking at a real nation-building workshop simulation and even, believe it or not, a technical patent aiming to literally engineer trust.
Wow. Okay, so that's our mission today then. Let's unpack this clash of ideas, see how it played out in these simulated political and economic challenges, and then get into this pretty radical technical fix they're proposing.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. These two core philosophies. How do the sources define them?
Okay, so first you've got the Crucible Thesis. Think of this as the pragmatist's corner. Very skeptical of things being too easy.
Right.
It basically says that real strength, resilience, wisdom, it's forged, like metal, in the heat of hardship you didn't ask for.
So suffering is necessary, almost.
From this view, yeah. It sees stability or ease as potentially leading to decay, weakness. It really trusts the hard lessons of history, the empirical evidence of what's worked, or at least what people have survived.
Huh. It does sound pretty bleak. Almost like you can't progress without pain. What's the alternative, then? This conscious ascent idea must push back hard against that.
Oh, completely. The conscious ascent, or the architect's view, sees relying on trauma as, well, frankly, as unnecessary waste, a terrible inefficiency.
Unnecessary waste. I like that framing.
Yeah. Their argument is that character should be something we build intentionally. A product of conscious choice, aspiration, but it needs a stable platform to grow from.
So reduce the suffering, the systemic problems.
Exactly. Eliminate that waste so that we as societies can actually focus our energy on higher goals. Collective flourishing, what the Greeks called eudaimonia.
It sounds much more hopeful, definitely more aspirational, but maybe a bit idealistic. Have people actually tried to build societies this way before?
Well, yes, and the sources point to historical attempts. Think about the Roman virtues, concepts like dignitas, industria, dignity, hard work. These weren't just random values, they were part of a designed ethical system.
Okay.
Or look at the chivalric code in medieval times, again, an aspirational framework, trying to consciously shape character, guide behavior towards a chosen ideal, not just react to events.
So that idea of intentional design leads us right into this workshop they ran, the Ethics Startup Nation simulation.
Precisely. And this wasn't just theory, it was a live experiment.
But crucially, they frame it not as a crucible, but as a dojo. What's the difference there? Isn't a dojo just sort of practice mode? Does it really test anything?
That's a really important distinction they make. A crucible is, random, unchosen suffering. A meteor hits, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
A dojo is a chosen challenge. It's a structured, safe-ish environment designed for deliberate practice, like learning martial arts. You spar to build skill without, hopefully, getting seriously injured.
Okay, so the goal was building character muscles proactively.
Exactly. Can we actually build a resilient, ethical society using these conscious ascent principles? Or are we just stuck waiting for the next disaster to shape us?
But where do you even start? Morality can be so subjective. They wanted to avoid pure relativism, the anything goes idea, but also didn't want to lean on, say, religious dogma. That's a tricky line to walk.
It is. They started with what they saw as near universal moral foundations. Things found across most cultures, like the basic need for safety and security.
So don't murder, don't steal, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Pretty much. Those universal prohibitions formed the bedrock. But then, you get to the harder part, mapping out the moral landscape for actual decision-making.
And this is where they bring in the Trinity of decision. Values, morals, and ethics. I found this breakdown really useful.
It's key to understanding the simulation's outcomes. So, values, first off, are your priorities. What you trade off against other things.
Like the example they use of the tech team and the infinite scroll.
perfect example. You have the value of user engagement, maybe measured by time on site, versus the value of, say, user well-being or respecting users' time. There's an inherent conflict, a trade-off to be made based on your priorities.
Okay, so values guide the trade-offs. What about morals? How are they different?
Morals are more personal. They're your individual lines in the sand. Principles you won't cross, even if it means sacrificing a value or a goal. Your non-negotiables.
Got it. And ethics then becomes the shared rules, the professional code, maybe.
Exactly. The shared decision framework within a specific context, like a profession, or in this case, their simulated nation, it's meant to provide common ground, bypassing purely personal preferences or morals in group decisions.
And to keep things from going off the rails, they established moral guardrails. What were those exactly? Like hard stops?
Yeah, basically red lines. Things designed specifically to combat that slippery slope of the ends justify the means.
Ah, the classic justification for doing bad things for a supposed good outcome.
Right. So these guardrails included things like guaranteeing fair trials, protection against slander, fundamental process protections.
Now, one concept that really jumped out at me was unmitigated goods. We usually think too much of anything can be bad, right? Like ambition turning to ruthlessness. But they identified some values that apparently can't be taken to excess.
Yes, these are fascinating. They act as sort of moral anchors in their system. The sources highlighted 3 specific ones.
Okay, what are they?
First, discernment. Basically, insight, understanding. They argue you can never have too much genuine understanding of a situation. More clarity is always better.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, good intentions. Now, this is more aspirational. Obviously, intentions aren't outcomes. But they argue it's the essential starting point for any ethical action. You have to intend well.
Right, the foundation. And the third?
The third is skillful navigation, which they link to the Greek concept of Metis.
Metis, I know that one. It's like cunning intelligence, practical wisdom, right? Not just book smarts, but knowing how to apply knowledge cleverly in the real world.
Precisely. It's that ability to adapt, to find the smart, effective, and ethical path through a complex, changing situation without breaking your core principles.
How does that work in practice, like in policy? Does Metis stop rules from becoming too rigid, too bureaucratic?
That's exactly the idea. Metis allows for flexibility. It prevents applying a rule blindly when the context clearly shows it would lead to a terrible or unjust outcome. It's about principle-driven adaptation.
Which is why it's an unmitigated good. You always want smarter, more ethical adaptation.
You got it. We can always use more Metis.
Okay, so this framework, values, morals, ethics, guardrails, these unmitigated goods, this set the stage for the actual simulation. 2 nations, Thinky and Idealia, with different starting values.
Right. Thinky Nation focused its charter on things like safety, free will, wholeness, celebrations, and sort of combining education with foresight. Very internally focused on citizen well-being.
And Idealia.
Ideally, put trust right at the absolute center. Everything else, empathy, compassion, accountability, balanced freedom, long-term thinking, flowed from that core commitment to trust.
And then, boom, crisis time. Test number 1, the false information crisis.
A classic ethical minefield. There's this great new worker rights law proposal, really beneficial.
Okay.
But the main reason it's gaining popular support is this viral claim that's completely false.
Oh boy. So what do? Correct the lie and risk killing your popular good law. Or let the lie stand because the outcome, the law itself, is so important.
And this immediately split the 2 nations right down their value lines. Idealia, with trust and accountability as paramount, they chose to correct the record. Publicly.
Wow. Even knowing it might tank the legislation, that takes guts. Seems almost politically naive, maybe.
Well, their calculation was different. They figured the long-term damage of being caught in a lie, or even just letting a known lie stand, was far worse than losing this one bill. The relationship with their citizens, the trust, was the ultimate asset.
So proving their say matched their due, even when it hurt.
Exactly. And they didn't just bluntly correct it, they used Metis. They deployed humor, memes apparently, to debunk the false claim while still making the case for the law on its actual merits, trying to be clever and maintain trust.
Okay, and Thinky. Their core value was wholeness, the workers' well-being. Which way did they go?
They went for the win. For Thinky, getting that worker rights law passed was so central to achieving wholeness that the factual basis of its support was secondary.
So they just let the false claim run.
They took no action to correct it. They judged the misinformation as basically irrelevant compared to the goal. For them, in this specific case, the ends absolutely justified the means because it served their highest value.
Yikes. Okay, different values, Drastically different choices. That leads us into the next test. Dilemma 2, the economic crisis. A mandatory 10% budget cut or tax hike, and they had to protect the vulnerable.
Yeah, another tough one. Here, Thinky's wholeness policy led to some interesting choices. They went for a hybrid approach on the cuts.
Okay.
They slashed discretionary spending first. And the specific cut, they eliminated funding for non-essential celebrations.
Wait, like cancel holidays? Public funding for them anyway? That sounds wildly unpopular. Talk about hitting morale.
High political cost for sure. But their logic, tied to wholeness, was that celebrations, while nice, weren't fundamental to core safety and economic security.
Huh. Okay. And taxes.
Taxes went up on large, profitable businesses and on discretionary spending, luxury goods, that sort of thing. The rationale being that those entities could afford it without damaging the essential wholeness of the average citizen.
Makes sense from their value perspective.
Yeah.
What about Idealia? Sticking to trust and accountability, how did they handle cuts?
They lean hard into shared sacrifice to maintain that trust. Accountability started at the top.
How so?
Immediate cuts to military spending and, significantly, cuts to high-ranking government salaries, leading by example.
That sends a strong message. And their revenue side.
Targeted taxes, heavy sin taxes on things like alcohol and tobacco, plus luxury taxes, and for supporting the vulnerable.
Yeah, how did accountability play into aid?
This was really interesting. They expanded food security programs a lot, but and this is key, the aid was restricted. It could only be used to buy actual food, like staples, produce. Not junk food, not cigarettes, not lottery tickets.
So providing help, but with guardrails tied to health and responsibility, consistent with their values.
Exactly. Aid aimed at long-term well-being and accountability, not just short-term relief, aligning with their whole trust-based system.
Okay, so this workshop really highlights how messy translating values into action is. Thinky's pragmatism versus Idealia's costly focus on trust. It's complex. So after seeing all this human difficulty and trade-offs, how do we get from this to an engineered solution? That seems like a massive leap.
It is, and this is where the sources pivot from the philosophical and simulated to the deeply technical. It introduces the cognitive prosthetic system patent.
Cognitive prosthetic. Okay.
This system is presented as the technical manifestation of the conscious ascent idea. Its purpose is basically to eliminate the need for human character to constantly fight against flawed, untrustworthy systems.
By fixing the systems themselves.
By solving what they call the tyranny of the gap between abstraction and reality, or, more simply, the say-do gap.
The say-do gap. I think I get that. We say the code does X, but under the hood it actually does Y or has unintended consequences.
Precisely. That gap is where bugs, exploits, manipulation, fraud, all of it lives. This patent claims to close that gap, to make the say and the do identical, verifiable at the hardware level.
Okay, hold on. How on earth do you guarantee that? That sounds like magic.
Well, the core innovation is something they call the unity principle, represented as SOPH, SPH.
SPH. What do those stand for?
So today, the semantic, meaning the intended logic of the software, is separate from the physical memory layout where data is stored, which is also separate from the actual hardware behavior, the chip's operations.
Right. 3 different layers, things can go wrong between them.
Exactly. The unity principle, SOPH, is based on a mathematical proof, they claim, that forces these 3 things, semantic intent, physical memory structure, and hardware execution, to be provably identical. One unified thing.
Identical. Why is that the key? What does unifying them prevent?
And think about it. If the meaning of the instruction, the place it acts upon, and the action itself are mathematically bound together, inseparable, then any deviation becomes impossible. An unauthorized action, a logical flaw that accesses the wrong memory. It can't happen because the link is fundamentally enforced by the hardware design.
The system is forced to do exactly what it says it does, and nothing else.
That's the assertion. The say and the do become one. The system becomes inherently trustworthy by design.
Okay. If that's possible, what are the results? What does that mean for someone using this kind of system?
3 huge things, according to the source material. First, verifiable integrity. Trust isn't a hope or a guess anymore. It's a real-time measurement.
How do they measure it?
They offer a formula. Trust with a 1 D-say. Basically, it quantifies the difference between what the system was instructed to do, S-A-Y, and what it actually did, D-O. If they're identical, the difference is 0, and trust is 1 or 100%. Any deviation makes the trust score drop.
So continuous, built-in auditing. No more need for external checks, potentially. What about understanding why it did something? the black box problem.
That's the second result, radical transparency. Because the system's logic, data, and execution are unified, the execution path itself is the explanation. There's no hidden layer. If you ask why this result, the system can show you the exact verifiable sequence of operations. No black box.
Wow. Okay, verifiable integrity, radical transparency. That sounds revolutionary for things like finance, AI, government.
Right.
But what makes it immediately compelling, say, to industry?
That's the third result, and it's a big one, hyperefficiency.
Faster.
By eliminating all the complex layers, checks, and protective mechanisms currently needed to manage the separation between software intent and hardware reality, and to guard against the say-do gap, you remove massive overhead.
All the stuff needed because we don't trust our current systems.
Exactly. The sources claim performance improvements in the range of 8.7x to 12.3x faster execution. Trustworthy systems, it turns out, are just fundamentally more efficient.
Okay, that combination, verifiable trust and massive speed up, that's the practical foundation the architect needs for this conscious ascent, isn't it? It moves it from philosophy to engineering.
It does. And they're not just hoping it catches on. There's a deliberate strategy outlined.
The rollout plan.
Yeah, a rational multi-year plan with clear acceptance milestones. Things like achieving technical credibility by late 2025, then demonstrating industry relevance in early 2026, pushing for policy alignment later that year, and finally securing major capital commitment by the end of 2026.
And they're targeting specific people.
They are. The plan involves engaging with major global figures known for embracing disruptive tech and grappling with these kinds of large-scale issues. People like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and Margrethe Vestager are mentioned as key targets for driving adoption and alignment.
So bringing it all together, we've gone from this deep philosophical debate, crucible versus conscious ascent, seen the messy reality of trying to live values in the Dojo simulation, and now landed on this highly technical blueprint for engineering trust itself. What really strikes me is that huge gap between just having warm and fuzzy values and actually having practical, scalable principles that work under pressure. The simulation showed how hard that is, how much integration it takes.
Definitely. And the ultimate choice these sources lay out is pretty stark. Do we keep letting character be shaped by the often brutal, inefficient, unpredictable crucible, where trust is something you earn by surviving deceit?
No.
Or do we leverage something like this engineered certainty, this verifiable integrity embodied by the unity principle to finally build that stable foundation needed for a true conscious ascent?
Which brings us to the final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on after this deep dive. If, and it's a big if a system could be engineered to be verifiably 100% trustworthy at its core, eliminating manipulation, fraud, the sheer cost of managing distrust,
right?
Does our whole idea of character being built by overcoming untrustworthy systems start to look like a tragic inefficiency,
Right.
a bug we could finally patch?
And if foundational trust was guaranteed, what then? What new, maybe higher order value and aspirations would we choose to pursue collectively once we didn't have to constantly watch our backs?
Something to think about.